All right. It is Friday, January 24th. Good morning, Eleanor. We've already done our pleasantries already this morning. Do you
Yes,
want to
we
get
did.
right into it? Um, we were talking about focus, which is actually, it's funny enough, the word clarity came up a lot this week. So I'm already immediately thinking about clarity and focus and trying to differentiate between the two. So I'll slow down here for a second. Um, yeah, I would love to continue the conversation that you were having with a couple of participants in your webinar yesterday. There's a bunch of times where you were sharing some things and I was like, oh, they got to know this. They got like this little bit could help, right? And I didn't want to interrupt because it was flowing. But I just wanted to kind of take you back to that conversation yesterday. Plus, actually, and I have to ask this, I can't remember the woman's name. She's been on there a lot. She used to live where you used to live, and you were, or I think so. And you were at an event, and she was talking about how she didn't want to be picked for something, but when she was picked, she was amazed at how she showed up. And what wasn't clear to me is what she was describing. I thought she said that, or that she was implying that they were kind of levitating.
They
But
were.
okay, good, because that little piece.
Okay, it's a client of mine who I've known since 1980. And Marvin and I took private Tai Chi Quan lessons
Okay.
with a Tai Chi Quan master named Mary Chow. And Mary's story, Mary was little and slight
So
and
little and slight compared to you,
powerhouse.
because you're little
What?
and slight. So was she smaller than you?
Um,
Because you're very petite. So
yes, she was probably a little shorter than me. I'm 5'5". She was probably 5'2" or 5'3",
okay.
and probably weighed a little more than I do. But in any case, she was Chinese. And Mary was a Tai Chi Chuan master, and her story was that she had seven children. And after her seventh child was born, she was bedridden. She had no energy and no chi. And she was told that she wouldn't recover. So she didn't know what else to do. And she started doing Tai Chi Chuan. And she couldn't get out of bed, she couldn't stand. So she would visualize doing the sequence, and she was healed. And she became a master. Um, and then she came to this country, and we took private lessons with her for about 2 years, learning all the form. And then she taught a Tai Chi Quan class at UCLA every week. So I referred many of my clients to the group class. And the client who was in the webinar on Thursday happened to have been in the class and also taken private lessons with her. And Mary took a great liking to this client of mine. And she is a very conscious, very special woman. And so at one point, my client was describing that she was praying that Mary wouldn't ask her, but Mary asked her to come up and let her demonstrate on her. Now, and Marvin shared that when Mary would demonstrate on somebody, it meant that the other person would end up on the floor. Because she could flip you in an instant and did. Mostly people didn't get hurt when they got flipped, but they got flipped. So my client didn't really want to be chosen, but was chosen. And the next thing she knew, the two of them were about 3 feet off the ground and doing this thing. And it freaked her out. And she never told me about it at the time, but she was freaked out all these years. And she wondered what that was about. In any case, um, it was the chi, you know.
Jeez.
Um,
Okay.
and Mary was smart enough to know that this client, she is a meditator. I had all of my clients doing transcendental meditation, and she's been at that point at which I would say that was probably after we knew Mary about 10 years. So it wasn't, a novice in a class like that. It was someone who, my client did the swords, which was advanced Tai Chi Chuan. And not everybody was asked to do the swords. So I actually remember going to my client inviting Marvin and me to go because she was going to demonstrate the swords with Mary at this graduation ceremony. And so we were invited to come. And so it wasn't just, my client, when she presented it in class, acted like she didn't know why. But the reason she was chosen was Mary knew who she was and what her capability was.
So many questions. So for one, that conversation happened so quickly yesterday. And the key nugget for me was, whoa, people were levitating? Like that's a thing? Because that flew by. It was all the detail around the event. And so I wanted to lock back into that because like you're familiar with the Bannister effect, the phrase the Bannister effect, which is I think it was 1930s. Steve Bannister was a marathon runner.
Uh,
And up until that point, humans had never run a mile in under 4 minutes. Never been done. And
right.
it turns out the belief was that people thought they would die of a heart attack. Like if you went under 4 minutes, you would, and that was the extent of our consciousness, our knowledge about, you know what I mean? So no one ran under 4 minutes because they thought they would die. And I guess this guy thought, screw it, if I'm going to die trying. And then he broke the 4 minute mile, and then like 30 people broke the record within 6 months, right? It cleared the way consciously.
Right.
So that ever since I've sort of heard about that, I've been fascinated with what's possible. And then I just need to hear or see it, and then it becomes an interest. So for some reason, I've always been interested in levitating or the idea of meditation being so clean that you can.
Did you start TM?
I've been doing the Sean shortcut version, which is there's a fellow on YouTube that does them every day that uses a different sound, but I understand that that's not proper TM, right? I need to be
No, and
trained.
through the TM organization, there is a cities program where you learn to meditate. I mean, you learn to levitate.
Huh? And by cities, you mean SIDHI? Like that's
Mhm.
the term. I don't even know what that term means. I hear it all the time. Like in Gene Keys, there's a city, and I don't really even understand what the word means.
Well, it's just a description of the level of consciousness you're supposed to be at
Hmm,
to have reached that level. And
cool.
I don't remember, I know when they started the cities program, um, I think you needed to do certain retreats in order to do it. I never paid much attention because uh, I was too busy to be involved in it. And um, but there is a cities program through um, transcendental meditation or Maharishi university in, I think it's Ohio.
So you've never. levitated because you didn't pursue that. Have you seen anyone levitate?
Yes.
Wow. So that must have been cool. Anyway, um, interesting. So how long were they levitating when you saw them? Is it a second? Is it a minute?
They
A
can
day?
stay up there.
Like just choose to with their meditation. Now, were you in meditation seeing it or
Uh-uh. There
fascinating?
were pictures of it, examples of it. I knew people who were TM teachers who levitated. Um, when I was in Chicago before I moved, the year before I moved, I was very involved in the TM movement in Chicago. And I took the science of creative intelligence at the TM Center. And actually, in on my first trip to California, I was interested in meeting Harold Bloomfield, who was the first psychiatrist who was a TM teacher. And I had come to California to a Jungian conference at Pepperdine in Malibu. And I drove down to San Diego, which was a 2-hour drive to meet Harold. And the reason I did that at the time was that in my practice as a therapist, I had quite a few TM teachers because I was so involved in the TM organization. And some of them were having a very hard time. And Maharishi would say to them, it's just stress, just keep meditating. And that was his answer to everything. It's just stress, meditate. And that wasn't clinically right. I was seeing TM teachers who were not just stressed, but they were really struggling psychologically. And one of them in particular, um, I was very concerned about because he was a medical doctor. He was an ophthalmologist in his residency and was a TM teacher. And he had questions clinically that were not being answered by Maharishi. So I drove down to San Diego to meet with Harold. And um, Harold was the only psychiatrist in the organization, and he had written the books. So I met with Harold, and my question to him was, what are you seeing clinically? And are you on board with what Maharishi is saying? Or do we need to deal with this? You know, and he was seeing the same thing I was seeing clinically, that TM was not enough to solve every problem psychologically. It was a big help in rebalancing, keeping people spiritual, tuning them into that level of who they are. But from the standpoint of working through issues that really needed to be worked through, you could not just tell them to go meditate, it would go away. And so I spent time with Harold and we became friends. And at one point, he offered to give me his practice when I said I was going to move, because he was going on a book tour. And then, you know, I went my way and he went his.
Hmm.
Um, and the around that time is when Maharishi started with the cities program and expanding and to do the cities program was pretty intense. Several times a week, meditating for hours at a time, and moving your consciousness to a certain level where you could levitate. Now, with the Tai Chi Chuan, I think it's a different process.
Well, and you've connected meditation then with Tai Chi Chuan. So um, this friend of yours had meditated for a long time. So that was clarity, quiet in mind, and then the combination of and what specifically is Tai Chi? Are you calling
Chuan,
it Tron?
Chaun, Tron,
Okay.
Tai Chi Chuan. Um, it's the form. There are different, like in any martial art, there are different forms and different sequences in which you do certain movements. And so in Tai Chi Chuan, there are four segments, and some of them repeat, and you move very slowly. And it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to do the whole form.
Hmm.
And you don't modify it. It's a moving meditation, basically. And then at the end of it, you sit and you focus on the dantian, which is the um, area just beneath the navel that is like the umbilicus, the source.
So these are ancient instructions, kind of like
No, it's an oral tradition, generally
handed down. It's been
handed
handed down.
down. And even Mary put it in a book and she did a video, and it is almost impossible to follow.
Really? Why? Difficult or tedious or
Very, very difficult
hmm,
to learn it that way.
hmm,
And when she taught it to us, we would learn one movement at a time. So we would go through the sequence and we would add one new movement every week.
hmm.
So it was, and we would practice every day.
It's this has come twice in my mind, so I'm just going to share it. And it's funny enough, like uh, it was last week or this week. It's popped on my radar twice. Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, talking about transcendental meditation. Like he has since the 70s as well. So here's a fella who's very accomplished, a lot of broad interests, known for his comedy, but I don't think he's sitting on his hands either. And he's been using transcendental meditation for a long time. And part of the reason he comes to mind is I'm fascinated that you've seen other people levitate and you're like, meh, I'm not interested in that. He does a comedy routine. It's pretty old, but he just talks about, 4-year-old, 5-year-old boys seeing superheroes. And we don't see them as superheroes. We see them as career options. Like, oh, I could be Superman. And so he does this bit about talking about the safety of Halloween costumes. And you don't want to put on the Superman costume and try to jump off the top of your house. Like that's
Actually, when I was a kid, um, we had the second floor apartment that had a, it was like on a porch window, and there was a ledge around the windows. And then between our place and the next house, which had one wall in common, there was a roof. And my cousin, a boy cousin who was a year older than me, had watched Superman, and he got out on the roof with his cape and he was ready to fly
Mhm.
as the parents swooped in and grabbed him.
Yeah,
So
in Jerry's routine, he kind of talks about they had to put instructions on it, like, do not, this is not a real cape. Do not jump off houses. Like, yeah. So it's just interesting to me. Like, I find myself wanting to know how to fly. And even as a kid, like, so, that's interesting too. been circling back to, and I seem to be rolling back and forth between my memories, but I grew up wanting to be a drummer and a pilot. Like that seemed to be what I wanted. The pilot thing, I think, was my grandfather's influence, but also that my family lived very close to Pearson International, Toronto's airport. So we were right, like planes were flying over all the time. And as a kid, I was fascinated by every plane. I used to be able to identify every plane by looking at it. I could tell you what size engines it had, the capacity of people, how fast it went. Like I don't know why I was into all that. I'm not even sure I was into flying. It was more like the planes and the data. So, and then I just ceased being interested in it. But there's so many ties to.
Do you have any past memories of being a flyer?
I don't. I would say I don't have any past memories of anything still. I get asked that question all the time, and
I
I've
think I think you I think there are some past lives related to what you're saying.
must be. There's a lingering afterglow of something.
I think one of them is related to one of your health issues, which I don't want to talk about on recording.
Okay, we don't have to. I'm not afraid to talk about anything, but if it's sensitive or anything, that's cool. Um, that's interesting. I'll have to spend some time with that. Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
when a child is fascinated by something, as you were with planes and with them flying and being able to identify, that's most likely indicative of some kind of past life.
So, okay, so here comes another thought just popped in my head, and I'm starting to trust those, which is, it's that inside voice. I don't remember the term. Funny enough, there's a great podcast they did an hour on what the phenomenon is called, but it's the idea that if you're in a dangerous situation, you get that inner voice that tells you to jump. So my parents used to live, or my grandparents used to live in the Etobicoke, near Toronto or in Toronto, and they were on like the 20th or 22nd floor building, an apartment in the 70s. I remember the feeling of being on their balcony and wanting to jump. Not
Mm,
because I was unhappy, but it was like, what would this experience be like?
right.
And it's haunted me ever since because I don't think I've ever trusted my body since then. So, and that was a voice that I haven't really, I mean, I gotta be honest, I think it's come
How,
and
in
gone.
what way was that related to trusting your body?
I think it was, I think it was one of the only times I truly remember where it wasn't a mental thought. Like, would that be, it's not spiritual. I didn't want to jump. I didn't want to die. I wanted to.
So I'm wondering if the thought was that you don't trust your body because you couldn't fly.
That's an interesting way to look at it. The other way I've heard it is we don't trust our bodies because it will eventually let us down, because it will degenerate.
Because you can't fly.
Yeah. So I should. Yeah. Hmm. Fascinating.
I mean, you wanted to jump off the balcony, you knew better because you knew your body wouldn't sustain that, and you were angry at your body because it couldn't.
Yeah.
You said since that time, you haven't trusted your body.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a connection there. Fascinating. I haven't had that thought in a couple of years. It used to come up all the time.
Well, but you just heard about somebody who levitated.
I know.
So now I don't think that my client or Mary or Maharishi or pick any guru you want, I don't think they could have been up on a high floor,
Yeah.
jumping off a balcony and been okay.
Thank you for putting the boundaries on my experiment.
Cindy was a skydiver
Yeah.
and, you know, talks very fondly of those times when she was jumping. And her husband was quite a daredevil jumper. Um, got into trouble for jumping off buildings. And obviously, I mean, you could do it if you had a parachute,
Which
but
is
you wanted to do it without. So maybe you were an extraterrestrial who could levitate.
mhm. My very first human design reading was by a woman named Kendra Curran. Lovely lady and very helpful in the beginning. One of the first things she said right at the beginning was, um, I didn't really know what she meant, but I think I understand more now. That like if I'm into wanting to do risky things, consider watching a video of it instead. You don't need to like jump out of planes just because you want to experience it. It was something to that effect. And I think I'm starting to understand what that means. Like but I feel like it's not coming from my mind. It is from my body, or it's an instinct. I'd love to know what that is. I'd love to be more in touch with that because I think
Divide it into the four worlds and ask yourself which world it's coming from.
asking which the desire to fly or where does why do I want to seek new experiences all the time?
Whichever you choose.
Hmm. I don't think it's emotional, mental. I don't even think it's physical. It is like a spiritual. It definitely is that inside voice whisper. Is that generally how I can interpret spiritual? Is it like it's an inside voice that I can't put a
Yes, but it's also looking at possibilities beyond the ordinary. Because in the spiritual world, it is not bounded by the ordinary.
yeah. I made a new friend the other day, and I was describing you and some of our conversations, and I was like, I don't know how to describe Eleanor. Like, certainly a friend, a mentor, but at the end, she said, "Oh, she's your spiritual teacher," and that was like that made the most sense. So, thank you for being my spiritual teacher.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Speaking of flight, because also you've been asking about synchronicities and stuff. So I decided every time I go to pickleball, I drive by this air museum. It's in Victoria. It's by the airport. So it's a small, they probably got 20 old planes in there, but one of them's they're reassembling an old Lancaster bomber. Um, and they also have a very famous plane in BC called the Mars bomber, which was a water bomber. It would like fly into lakes, scoop up water, and so they have this thing on display there. It's quite the plane. So keep driving by that place going, I gotta go. And I think I told you about this Masonic like key that my grandparents left me in this box. And I was like, well, I gotta take the key, just put it in my pocket. So I basically went there on an adventure to see if I was drawn to anything to plug the key into something. Like it was that level of like vibe
Mm.
wandering around, right? I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to be that guy, but it was in my pocket. But I did have all sorts of experiences there. I found myself drawn to certain planes, and they were all, curiously enough, made by Avro, which was the company that made the planes in Toronto that my grandfather worked on or worked at. So it was like actually from where I grew up. And then I ended up having a conversation with one of the caretakers there. And I could just feel myself going, I don't really want to talk with anyone. I'm doing my own thing. But I just kind of opened up to it. And this fella just started giving me all sorts of information. We got talking about helicopters, and he seemed to think I was a helicopter pilot. Like
Mm.
the level of knowledge I had about helicopters, which I thought everyone had. When I was talking to him, he just assumed I was a pilot. So I've had that kind of conversation with people before where they seem to be surprised that I'm not in their field. But uh, why am I telling you this? Because he wanted to take me out to see this Mars bomber. And so we go out into this bomber, and I'm standing in it, and he keeps getting me to look in these little passageways, like really tight spaces in there. And I realized like I was having to trust this guy. He's standing behind me. I'm by myself out in the middle of sort of like an airfield in a plane. And this guy's getting me to peek my head in these little spaces. But I've got this, I'm thinking about the key the whole time too. So I'll go pop my head in. No, nowhere to put a key. Nothing came of that. But what did happen is my father called me while I was standing inside that bomber. And he just said, I'm having the best day. And my father never calls for that.
Mm.
My parents generally call with tech support issues or someone died. To the point I've said, like, please don't call. Because if you call, it usually means, like, if it's a tech issue, send me a text and I'll get back to you when I can think about it. So it really kind of disrupts my flow. And I didn't realize how upsetting it was, because when I get calls, it's usually bad news. Or it was. So I get this call inside this Mars bomber through this whole thing. And my dad's having a great day. And I was like, well, so am I. So I'll call you back in half an hour. So even that was a boundary thing, right? I'm having a conversation with another person. So I do the whole thing. I leave. I'm in the parking lot. I call my dad, and he's just elated, and he deservedly so. Um, Someone had slipped a check under his doormat for like $12,600.
Wow.
So this someone is someone who ripped my father off, and he basically shared office space with my dad for 4 years, and he was his bookkeeper. Turns out one day he left and never returned. Turned out he hadn't done any bookkeeping. So every time he said he was going to the bank, every time he said he submitted documents, he had done nothing, like literally zero. So it cost my father about 12 grand in accounting fees just to reverse engineer that, plus everything else. This check just arrived from my dad. Now, I had told my dad not to pursue this guy because I was worried about my father's health. He doesn't need this drama, and plus this fella is an RCMP reservist. So that's the Canadian Mounted Police. He's a reservist in the police, but he does horrible narcissistic things like this.
Hmm.
I was left facing my own values in the same point too. Because part of me is like, this guy has just gotten away with something. Like in his mind, he's fessed up by paying the money back, but nobody knows. He's just gonna, weasel away back into being a
Well,
reservist.
it's nice that he paid back your dad.
Yeah, I had to let go of that, But that's literally what that I'm glad my dad was happy. And I don't know if you remember, but a couple weeks ago, I don't know if it was I think it was in a private session, but we looked at the astrology for my father, and he had like just the top three, like
Mm.
literally every planet was there. And you said he was here like about values, and he just he needed to he needed to win that thing, and I was discouraging him not to, but it was because I was worried about his safety. So I'm glad he did it.
Hmm.
Frustrating as it was watching him get upset about the whole thing. So, and then just getting upset about so many things over the years, right? So, but yeah, that was like a weird. Like I kind of was there in this unusual situation I put myself in for reasons that felt silly, but here I am talking about it live and being shared. So it's not that silly. Um, yeah, my dad was given like a relief valve that day. Like, he won one. So that was good.
So he had actually pursued it?
I don't know what he did. Because I didn't get to talk to him, but I think what he did is started legal proceedings, and this person just paid him to make the legal proceedings go away. But I don't know that for sure, but that's my sense.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think that's what bothers me ultimately. people do horrible things and then skitter off and do it again. I've had that experience myself, and I'm watching like the person lives in a city and I know what they're doing. And it's not mine to interfere. So it takes a long time to get over that.
Well, if your dad feels pleased that he has a resolution, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what he wanted. So that's good. Yeah. I've always somehow been drawn in to interfere. I would get asked, I'm having this trouble with this customer or something, and so I'll give my suggestion and they'll still do the opposite. So it's just so frustrating. I'm glad this one worked out, I think is what I'm saying.
Maybe next time you should say, instead of giving your opinion, why don't you ask him what he wants to do?
Mm.
And then just support what he wants to do.
I've actually done that a few times. Thank you. And what would you like to have happen is like a phrase that's
A
come up.
great word is a great question, isn't it?
It is. Because they have to think about their intent. They have to reflect, they have to remove themselves from being triggered. And they're basically stating what they want to have happen next versus, do you want to continue and bitch about this forever? Or what would you like instead? So yeah, it's a very, very powerful phrase. Looks like something's on chat. Let's just see what's going on there. Ah, perfect. Alina Eli, and I suspect this is from our conversation. Children today suffer. Oh, here, I'll put it on the screen even. You won't see it, but cast will. Children today suffer from hyperactivity and behavioral disorders. Is there an explanation in your teaching of the four worlds?
There is not an explanation per se from a theoretical standpoint, but we do know medically that there are things that have influenced our physiology and our chemistry over the last 40 or 50 years. And there is evidence that children, well, for one thing, birth control pills came into existence in the 1960s. And when women started taking birth control pills, the estrogen that they peed out got into the water table. And that has created issues in the biology and the evolution of the biology. Fertility is down. Vaccines, children are being given way too many vaccines. And in the since the early 80s, vaccines have been modified. And there have been manipulations with the things that affect the biology. So they're on a human physical level. We know that things like plastic in the food system and hormones in the water table and tampered with vaccines and giving too many vaccines all have had an effect on what's happened to the physiology. So while we can't say it's the four worlds, we can say the biological mental world axis has been modified and distorted, and we're feeling the consequences of it.
Yeah, it's a race towards convenience. It's plastics, it's everything. Even just the Wi-Fi, cellular, Bluetooth, like everything we throw at ourselves, we're just kind of cooking ourselves. So,
Well, there are ways to protect yourself from some of it.
mhm,
For example, I don't drink out of plastic anymore.
mhm.
I have EMF devices on all of my computers, and I even have this on my desk,
Yeah,
which,
I got the small one on my phone.
yeah, I have the small one on my computer, but I keep um, a big one in my office because it does 500 feet. And I have one on my kitchen table, and I have one on my phone. I have one on my computer. I have one on each of my laptops. And the most we can do in a culture that has gotten fairly contaminated is to protect ourselves.
Getting like it seems like we're going to be able to see energy more and more soon. So it'll be interesting to see where science or
We
technology
being
go.
who?
Um, I wanted to buy one of those devices, but I'm on a budget. But then I have to make a choice between is it important for my health or is it worried about the budget? So I didn't buy one. I think the rationale in my mind was because there was like $300 for one of those
They're
things.
expensive.
They're expensive.
There are less expensive ones out there.
Well, so that's therein lies the problem for me. A, accepting that it works because I can't see it or touch it or feel it or prove it.
I can prove it.
Okay, so we'll come to that in a second. But then those that are doing it cheaper, have they like anything, like the human design stuff, anything that once it's in other people's hands, we're seeking efficiency and cost savings, and before you know it, the intent is lost from the original device or transmission.
Mhm.
So how please prove it, because or at least or give me something to
Well, all I
learn.
know is that there are quite a few tools around, and I've used a number of them. Um, the one I tested because it is expensive and it's a significant investment to have as many as I do. Um, I do have one of these sitting on my nightstand. And so, given that it was where I sleep and where I keep my head, I used an EMF meter and checked the EMF output on my nightstand, and it was zero. Therefore, it works.
Yeah.
And I tested it. Now, the Aries technology, which is the ones I've showed you, were originally developed for astronauts out in space.
Okay.
And it is patented technology. It is not, there are a lot of EMF devices out there that make claims, and I don't know that they have the data behind them. So,
Therein lies the rub, right? Like that's where it's like I need to apparently I need to see things to accept them. Back to the like levitating thing. Like hearing your description and others, I'm like now I'm intrigued, right? Now I'm in. I will say the energy in me feels great, even in my own little ways. I've been making changes, so like I don't dispute any of it, but it's really difficult to not seem like a crazy carnival barker to everyone else around me talking about it. So that's what I'm working with.
well, Sean, if it makes you feel any better, I've been doing this my whole life.
I know.
And, I knew I was doing Reiki in 1977, three Reiki masters in the West. And when I started giving Reiki attunements to my family members or to clients, well, my clients always trusted me. And when I said do this, they did that because they knew that I was not a flake. But Marvin and I were about 20 years ahead of the time on most things.
For sure. Well, and you also have the professional career and credibility and all the hard work and certifications you've earned, right? So it's interesting, like, and not at all I'm saying is I'm a dude in a purple mohawk going, I've learned this shit and I can't back it up other than conversations I've had with some cool people. So
Well, you can
that's
get an EMF meter and test it.
yeah,
You can
right.
certainly, you know, do some research on which foods are pure and what some people are doing to doctor food
Oh
and
yeah.
to make it unhealthy. And fortunately, now Robert Kennedy Jr. will be the health secretary and he'll be cleaning up the health in the United States.
I haven't been following the news at all, like really purposely staying away this week because I get it from everyone else anyways. But I did hear that they're looking to release the assassination information
That
on.
has been, the executive order has been done, and they have 45 days to review it before it is publicly released. But yes, it will be released, and there is evidence that it was an inside job,
I,
as we suspected.
I think enough people
Know that.
that, yeah, we know.
We all knew.
So that'll be the that's gonna be part of this unraveling, I think, because
Well, a more important part of the unraveling is the disclosure about extraterrestrials
yeah,
and other civilizations
that
that
was a really hard one to grasp. So
are among us.
yeah. Can you let's explore this further? Because I've had some interactions in the last couple of days where people look differently after I had an interaction with them. Um, do you when you meet someone, do you see characteristics in them that others may not see?
Yes,
And is it physical? Like and does it come and go, or is it just always there? And by come and go, I mean you've
I
had a
don't
full
look.
interaction with the
I
person.
do not look.
Okay.
Um, I think it's intrusive to look without permission. And when my psychic abilities came back full bodied, um, I could see anything I wanted about anybody. And I didn't think that was the right thing to do. So I pick and choose what I look at, and I don't generally um, open the door to seeing everything.
You're choosing not to see that. That's interesting. I don't recall welcoming these visuals that I get or choosing to see them or not.
No, and I didn't at first either.
Hmm.
But when you're walking down the street or sitting, as I was at an airport, and knowing that somebody was going to die, um, I don't think that's something that I need to see in strangers.
Yeah,
And I don't even want to see it in people I really know because it's intrusive. So, I mean, I can say to you, well, Sean, have you explored past life experiences related to the planes? knowing full well what the experience you've had is.
Oh, so you already know. Like,
Yes.
so I will explore that and then check in with you. Is that the best way to do that?
Well, you're going to know more than I know. It's your experience, but I know that you've had those experiences, and I know that it is related to a past life. And if I wanted to, I could read the details of that, but I'm not going to go there because it's none of my damn business.
But if I
It's,
want to know, we can do that offline.
I could, but of what use would it be?
I don't know. I gotta know for some reason.
Well, but you know.
Okay. Well, I don't
See,
know how to access.
if it comes from you, Sean,
Yeah.
it's going to have so much more valence to it and so much more release in it.
Hmm.
Is your grandfather still alive?
No, they're both passed.
Hmm.
One well in
Did
92.
he leave any diaries?
If he did, I don't have access to them. I could ask my mother. I'm sure she would have mentioned that. At the end of the day, they left me this chest, this old, like a wooden box that they used to travel from the UK to Canada. And it had that key in it that I was telling you about. And a letter from my grandmother that just was full of questions. Like it was almost like a riddle. So I need to go back and read it again. But I think I've shared this before, but like I didn't really want to keep anything from everyone. Like I didn't even want pictures of me as a kid. Like my mother kept offering to me, and I was like, nah, just destroy them. Like that was my mindset before. And I regret saying that because I know some things are gone. Um, but for some reason, the only thing I wanted was this box for my grandparents. But I don't recall asking for it. I recall being told, voluntold that I wanted this box.
Hmm.
So So I do I walk by it once in a while and I'm like, oh, I should really pick it up and just look underneath it, but I haven't even done that. There's something it's just still a wooden box, but a few people have suggested there might be hidden compartments or things in it, and then the
You
fiber.
never know what you'll find
Yeah. Well,
or what secrets could be revealed from even touching it. Um, when I when all of my psychic abilities came in uncontrolled, um, I studied with a psychic to learn how to turn things on and off. And I studied with another person who taught me how to read objects.
hmm,
So it's one of the reasons I'm extremely cognizant of who I give anything to.
hmm.
Because if I've owned something and I give it to somebody else, then anyone could know everything about me from the object.
Like the Reiki certificate that we hung up proudly the other day here that you signed.
Mhm.
Oh wow, cool. If that's okay, then they um neat.
So, handling objects, you can read the object. And if you have this box, it has a lot of secrets in it, and you can tune into some of them.
So I had that sense because while I was at this air museum, I had my hand around the key. At times it felt like it was getting warmer, but I'm sure it was just gripping it for so long. But I found myself drawn to like touching and like the planes, like putting my hand on it and just hanging out there, like I do with trees as well. I don't know how to talk to it, but I sense that I'm getting data. I'm just not sure what to do with it or how to interpret it.
When you know, you'll know.
Fine, fine.
If you want to know,
Mhm.
then you have to do the work to get there.
Hmm.
which means time meditating, time asking the right questions, time being clear about why you want to know what you want to know. The door won't just open,
Yeah, why I want to.
not if you have any integrity. It'll wait until you know what you're going to do with it.
Interesting.
See, these energies, if you think about them, where do they come from? They come from spirit. In order to go to certain levels of spirit, you have to pass through certain tests. And very few people actually pass the tests.
Okay, because this has come up 3 times in my head now, and it's relevant to class from Thursday. I'm gonna open with the terrible question. Was it the 24th path or the 25th path we discussed that you discussed this week?
24th.
24th. Okay. You're talking about the fear of death, and that's been a theme for a long time for me. I had a really cool chat. It was with Azurite, actually, about a week ago. And I was describing something that happened, and she's like, "Oh, good," or something to the effect of, "You've already faced death. You just forgot." And that was an interesting conversation or thought that really set my mind free over the last week. So I'll tell you why she said that. I told you that I had stomach surgery. And this is in 2017. And it was everything about it was terrifying. I'm going against the doctor's orders. I'm not going to be insured because I went to Puerto Vallarta because I had to wait 3 years in Canada and I knew I'd be dead. So it took my health into my own hands. I actually had a great experience. Everything about it was amazing, but it was against everybody else's suggestions, right? You're going to Mexico, they'll butcher you, like all the things. Even friends, then the local health authority just tell me I'm crazy. But the local health authority got back to me 3 years later to tell me that I had been accepted and, good news that I was 3 years past the event. So, anyways, um, I'm in Puerto Vallarta. Wendy decides to come with me, and which is highly stressful for her, but she was there as my companion. And I know the next morning I am going to have this surgery. I'm going to be put under. And I wrote an email to myself, like with my sort of wishes and thoughts for everybody, because I wasn't sure if I was going to be back. And I knew that if I emailed it to myself, I could just delete it the next day, which is what I did.
Mhm.
And I've never gone to find that email, never even wanted to, but um, there was something about that process of being like that. This is my final. So yeah, I got up the next morning. I was fine. Deleted the email. The procedure, instead of taking 45 minutes, took over 3 hours. So Wendy was sitting there like terrified, like what's gone wrong. And the way the surgeon described it, I had very thick arteries or something, and it was a lot of work. But I have no idea what happened during that. But seemed to me that I had kind of faced death. And when I was talking with her this week, I was like, holy cow, like I did that. And I had not even noticed I had. And it was just shifted everything because it wasn't like an exercise I felt like I needed to do anymore. It was almost like I needed to like come back to that, remember that, and then access bars it, like deal with the pop and pod thing. So yeah, I don't some like this in this last week, I don't have a fear of death like I used to. Also dealt with claustrophobia through hypnosis tapes. I think I told you about that. So like there's just an openness and expansiveness in my chest, and any fears that remain now are, even as I describe it, just are more like flies that I can swat at.
Good.
So, so have I addressed death? I part of me, I don't think I'm saying have I passed
What did
that
you do with the business?
the
The,
one I want to sell?
the business that you wanted to release?
Very close to, I'm hoping today or worst case Monday, we've hired a acquisition expert to help me with the wording. But I'm basically putting out a sales prospectus either today or Monday. And Wendy's on board with it. Like this is what we're doing. We're just filling in the dots to have someone buy it. Even if it's for $1 and they take on the debt and they turn the business around, I don't care. Energetically, I'm done with it. A little part of my mind is always, I could do something else with it. The accountant is suggesting, why don't you keep the business and use the losses for taxes and stuff? And I'm like, that keeps me energetically attached to the bullshit. And the whole reason I don't want to have the business is I don't want to deal with paperwork and taxes and nuisance and old energy. So to me,
Well, but letting go of it and selling it is another death.
mhm,
And so your reluctance before to let go of it was not fully releasing the death.
yeah, yeah. It wherever it lands, I'm okay with. So it's, if it's not sold, if it's closed, if I keep it, but I don't have to hear about it, like I just don't, it's different for me now. It's not attached to my pride. It's not attached to my humility. It's now just a distraction. It's definitely not the kind of work I want to be doing or with the people that I want to be doing it with. And
Mhm.
that's really all that matters, I think. So, yeah. And as I say all that, my hips and like bottom core are as open as they've ever been.
Mm.
Attended a bunch of sort of yoga classes this week, and I was really able to push through things and bend my legs in ways that, like, I used to store a lot of stuff in my hips, and my ability to move my body is something I can't recall. I could cross my legs this week without pain. I haven't done that since I was 4.
Well,
So it's still, like, I think within 2 or 3 weeks I should be able to like pretzel myself. So something has moved. I don't know if that's a good thing. Back to levitating and pretzels. I've seen a video where there were people in a room, there's like 60 of them, and they were in whatever that, crossed leg, and they were hopping. They were like they didn't seem to be meditating. They just seemed to be trying to hop. So when you have witnessed this, is it just a light floating? Do you have to initiate?
I haven't put that much energy into it, Sean. The amount of effort for the amount of gain is not worth it.
Not worth it? Okay.
And we have the technology from extraterrestrials for anti-gravity. So we don't need to work that hard. Within a year to 2 years, we're going to have anti-gravity devices.
Because we've always had it. We'll just actually have access to it this time.
Well, we've certainly had them since 1947.
That's what I mean. Like, it's been withheld. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Frustrating. How are you doing for time?
We have about a half hour.
Okay. So in this 24th path, my recollection from class was a big part of it is facing death. That's it in a nutshell? Being someone that's always wanted to look
Well,
ahead.
it's not really facing death, Sean.
No.
It's being so tuned in to the spiritual dimension that you stay in the moment and you life and death flow. It's not a beginning and an end. It's a flow and it's a constant movement. It's like the waves in the ocean, ebbing and flowing and moving. And there's not an internal judgment because there's a constant deference to spirit. It's not a personal, we're not on a personal journey. We're on a transpersonal journey. And the personality is a very small piece of who we are.
Describe transpersonal. Like, do you mean we're on a journey that's collective? Are those words, do those go together? What is a
No, when
transpersonal?
I say transpersonal, I mean that we transcend our personality. The personality is part of the mental waking world, and the physical body is part of the mental waking world. In the spiritual, emotional, angelic world, we're pure light and energy and spirit. We're not cellular on the level of cellular that manifests physically. So when I say transpersonal, it's living from spirit, and the rest of it falls into place. You don't overthink it.
Well, something is going on where I am operating hour to hour or day to day. So there's a little bit of being like in and very present, and then trying to have a plan and goals. It's quite a uh, interesting chasm to be in. One question I had for you, like you have, or yeah, in your profession, I mean, these days you definitely do what you love, and you're driven by what you're driven by, but you still live in a Monday through Sunday world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's the biggest one right now is just, not getting caught up in a Monday or a Friday and what that entails. So I've been navigating that a lot.
How would you get sucked in by it if you're doing what you love and love what you're doing?
Hmm.
See, to me, I do different things on different days, but there's no difference.
Hmm. No, I think it's part of this is just the letting go. And part of it's the business that is a drain on us. Like we're literally paying money into it when I'm not behind it spiritually. So yeah. So I think I'll give myself a B plus on where I'm at under the circumstances. It's been highly.
Don't judge, don't rate, don't mark, no judging, no comparing. And don't need to understand it. Just be, Sean. Trust being.
Yeah,
Are you drumming?
quite a bit. Uh,
And that's what you love.
it is. And I even yesterday I said to Wendy, like, I need to go, I forget what I did, but it was go pick up something because I'm kind of reassembling my drum kit. And I've had an electronic kit for years and it pleases everybody else because I can be in headphones and I'm not making a noise. But they're electronic. Every time I hit them, I know they're not real. So I think I was telling you last week, I finally got a new snare drum and I got one that's made of wood because I can actually feel the vibration now. I couldn't before. Before it was just hit hard. Almost any drummer that you'll talk to that is working is like, I need something that cuts through. I need to cut through the sound system. So it's all about like how to stand out. And it's not sonically pleasant. It's we're aiming for being heard and loud. And I was caught up in all that. Didn't know it, just thought it was part of the territory. And then lately I was like, had a conversation with ChatGPT, like, I'm playing this kind of music. I want to feel it. I want it to sound like it's got depth. And it was like, well, then you want an oak snare drum. I'm like, great. Okay, I'm gonna go, or sorry, maple. So I'm gonna get a maple snare drum. And what depth? Well, 6.5 inches. So I found one that was 6 because it was perfect. Um, where every time I put a little bit of energy towards that, other things seem to move. Even if it's just like half an hour, just go take this drum to the office because I'm starting to assemble it. So yeah, it's really it's awesome. Where a little bit of the intention goes, that energy flows. That phrase is real. Um, so long as it's actually what I want to be doing. And it is.
Well, the energy flows, but the question is whether you are aligned with the energy that's flowing.
Hmm.
And if the energy is flowing and you're not aligned with it, then what are you doing being there? Simple question. Hard for most people to answer because they compromise.
Hmm. I think we're at an hour and a half.
Mhm.
I want to wrap this up here. I just want to catch up with you a little bit after. We good to go?
Okay.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I gotta hit the button to end.